The image you're looking at comes from a video that's recently been making the rounds on social media. Everything's fine at this point, but what happens after this moment is highly distressing and is very difficult to watch. I'll tell you everything, but as usual, allow me to give you some context first. This man right here is Nathan Odinson. He's a 33-year-old professional base jumper, skydiver and photographer, and he's been a daredevil for the majority of his life. He's a super fun guy, and despite others maybe not understanding why he does what he does, the rush he gets from this is everything to him. As soon as he steps off the base or hops out of a plane, it's like everything around him just disappears and he's at peace until they safely land. The sky was where he felt at home, and he has done this over 5,000 times in total. In January of this year, Nathan left his home county of Cambridgeshire, England to travel to Thailand with intentions of making some content, to visit a friend, and just to spend a chunk of time in a country that he's very much learned to enjoy. He'd eat some food, get shown around town by his one buddy, mess around a bit, and try to conjure up some stunt ideas. While they were eating and brainstorming, his friend quickly remembered a great spot he knew about from way back, and it was one where Nathan could possibly get in a base jump, so they hopped in the car to go scope it out together. As soon as they got near the location, Nathan immediately liked it. It was a 29-story apartment building, and although the height was cutting it close, he knew he'd done jumps from around that height before, and so he believed he'd be totally fine. The only real stipulation here was that to get up to the top, they'd have to wait in the lot to sneak in until security was out of sight, so they were breaking the law. Nathan was a daredevil though, and a bit of trespassing in a loosely guarded apartment complex was baby food to him. So, he and his Thai friend would hop the fence and sneak in when the security was on the other side of the perimeter, make their way to the top, and prepare to jump. He'd get his parachute set up, counted down, and stepped out. Everything was successful, and beyond just the base jump, he totally loved the rush that came with sneaking in. So much, in fact, that for the remainder of his trip, they were going to go back there to jump a few more times. And that's what they did. They pulled up, waited, hopped the fence, got back to the top, and took care of business. The final time they did this, however, things would go completely differently and take an extremely dark turn. As they got to the roof, Nathan put on his parachute, stood at the edge, and asked his friend to start recording. This time though, something in the air was different. It's like he had this strange hesitation that he hadn't felt since his early days of jumping, and he was tensing up slightly. He put on his poker face though and got himself to shake it off, instead focusing on controlling the stunt. So, once again, he would count down from 3, say see it to the camera, and do his favorite thing in the world. Something really bad happened this time though, and it happened very quickly. His parachute refused to properly operate, and it was, for whatever reason, not centered behind him like it should have been. These are incredibly short stunts, and so you have no room for error or any significant amount of time to be able to adjust things. If it doesn't work out, it's a very bad situation 10 out of 10 times. And unfortunately for Nathan, his worst nightmare was coming to life. He would step out, panic and grab behind him once he realized what was occurring, but within a matter of seconds, that was it. He'd pass through a tree at full velocity before coming in contact with the road below, scarring onlookers and startling his friend. In the video, we hear his friend's reaction as well as one from a woman down below. And obviously at 29 stories, there was no making it out of this. According to Daily Mail, a traumatized security guard even said, "I heard the sound of a tree and I thought it was a fallen branch hitting the ground. A woman yelled, so I walked over and realized it was a person. They were no longer with us." Emergency services would quickly arrive on scene and confirm what everyone already knew. They'd cover him up, take him away, and contact the British embassy so they could notify his family. Evidence was collected, the Thai friend was interrogated, and it was deemed that Nathan really just made a fatal error. Nathan's older brother told the Daily Mail, his mini pilot chute was caught in his harness, meaning there was no chance it would have deployed. Despite his significant experience, he made the error without realizing. He'll be missed by so many. He was fun-loving and joyful, and great with kids. He was a hero to my 3. So yeah, this case is a great reminder that even the most experienced can make serious errors. If we account for all 5,000 of his jumps, that's a 99.98% success rate, and at least he went doing what he loved. Also, don't break the law as a tourist in a foreign country. This case is absolutely insane, and it has a twist that I can almost guarantee you won't see coming. Kenneth Parks is a 23-year-old recently married man who has a great relationship with his wife, his in-laws, and most of the people around him. He works a solid job near his home in Pickering, Ontario, had his whole life ahead of him with his spouse, and was already planning on having children. Recently though, he'd got into a bit of debt from gambling, and despite not being the end of the world, it really was stressing him out. One of the ways this manifested was through him sleepwalking at night, and since it was becoming a problem, he was eventually formally diagnosed with it. Sleepwalking can vary in severity, and in his case, it was generally pretty bad. He'd wake up and start walking the dog, roaming the house, or in one case, he even went grocery shopping. His wife, Karen Woods, was familiar with the process and was getting adjusted to all the protocols. After all, there's no better person to handle this than your spouse. The majority of the time it was no big deal, and she'd always get him back into bed. One night in 1987 though, things would get a little extra strange and his wife would not hear him when it was happening. Believe it or not, Kenneth woke up, got into his car, and started driving. I know how far-fetched this sounds, but bear with me. This story sounds like a work of fiction, but it's 100% real. It's reported that after getting in his car, Kenneth drove almost 20 kilometers to his in-laws' house in Scarborough, a city nearby, and parked his car in the driveway. All of this while he was still sleepwalking. His parents-in-law, Barbara Woods and Dennis Woods, were home and they were obviously just upstairs sleeping. In some insane turn of events, Kenneth entered their house with a key that they gave him previously, walked into their room with a tire iron, and you can probably see where this is going. He would repeatedly use this to hit Barbara, relentlessly striking her until she was no longer with us. He'd also grabbed a utensil from the kitchen on the way up and used that 4 times too. Dennis, who was awoken to this happening right beside him, was pursued by Kenneth as well, but managed to push him off. It was around this time that Kenneth snapped out of his sleepwalking episode, absolutely lost his mind, and immediately drove to a nearby police station to turn himself in. He was quoted as saying, "I think I have just killed 2 people." When the trial came, he and his legal team made the ridiculous argument that he was not criminally liable, as he was automatistic and was experiencing an episode where he was completely unaware of whatever actions he may have committed. A doctor provided evidence confirming that he was asleep at the time of the attack, and 5 neurological experts further verified this. Obviously, the jury wouldn't take this seriously, as how would a man be able to find his keys, drive 14 miles while asleep, and successfully open their door? There were just too many things in between. Well, turns out the jury did take it seriously. They completely believed the evidence that was provided, and Kenneth was acquitted of his actions. He was deemed not criminally responsible due to his mental state. And believe it or not, his father-in-law, who was also attacked, even testified in Kenneth's defense, meaning he obviously saw something behaviorally that indicated he really was in that state. This case remains extremely contentious, with some people completely believing him and trusting the medical proof, and others thinking it was a failed attempt and getting some sort of insurance or inheritance. See, around this time, Kenneth had pled guilty on fraud charges when he was caught falsely billing his employer $30,000 to cover his gambling debts. He did pay his restitution though, so it's not clear as to whether or not harming his in-laws, who he had a great relationship with, would even make any sense. Kenneth Park's case remains one of just 35 documented cases worldwide of homicides committed while sleepwalking. Let me know what you guys think. This case is quite short, but it's creepy and really fits the Halloween mood, so I had to cover it. One December evening in 2016, a 64-year-old woman from Long Island named Joanne Cullen was spending some alone time at home and reading. She was feeling a little lonely, didn't have much to do, and so she did what she'd often do to comfort herself and go visit her parents' graves at the nearby cemetery. After all, it was the Christmas season and she was missing them a little extra. It'd been over 20 years since they'd passed on, but she still missed them as much as she did on day 1, and she made sure to spend as much time over there as she possibly could. She even put together a small wreath with a bow on it and brought it down with her to leave with them. She arrived without a hitch, got out of her car, and started making her way over to the gravesite. As she got there, a feeling of peace would wash over her as usual, and she said some hellos. Her mood almost immediately improved. Joanne then started to bend over and set down the wreath she had prepared for them when, in some horrifying turn of events, she was sucked into the ground where her parents' graves were, causing her to fall forward, hit her head off the tombstone, and crack a tooth. She cried out for help as she was in the ground, but no one was nearby, and so her efforts went unnoticed. Luckily, by some chance, she was actually able to pull herself out and make her way to a nearby hospital where the police would be notified and an investigation would begin. It turned out that some of the grave diggers who were backfilling a grave near her parents' graves forgot to completely fill, leaving an empty void nearby that caused Joanne to fall in. Her lawyer said to the New York Post, "Getting stuck in your parents' grave when you go to visit them on a cool December afternoon with the sun going down is terrifying and traumatizing." She said she will never go back there. She has nightmares, headaches, and is even in counseling. Cullen ended up suing the St. Charles Resurrection Cemetery for a total of $5 million, and as of today, there's not really an update on how the lawsuit went. It's a horrible situation overall and just extremely creepy. Thank you guys so much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing or giving a thumbs up, but if not, that's okay too. I upload 2 or 3 videos like this every week, so maybe I'll win you over next time. Also, huge shout out to all the people who already signed up for Patreon. I'm going to be starting a completely exclusive series there where I can be free and not have to worry about all the boundaries. I've already started working on it and I'm super pumped to show you guys it. I just want to stress though, if it's not within your means, don't feel any way obligated to support. Just watching is enough.